What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here. Back again, but this time we are talking college football, bringing you a new series. We are going to be breaking down the college football teams ahead of the 2025 season. The goal is to get through all of the Power 2 teams, the middling conferences, as well as the G5 before the season starts, and then put all of this into a draft guide format, trying to give you a little preview on that right now, going team by team. But the goal there is to have something that's constantly updating, unlike your magazines. So when transfers come through, injuries, all that can be updated with hopefully close to instant analysis, but all that's a work in progress. And you'll get a little glimpse of it here as we talk about our first team, Alabama. Last thing to say before we get started is this is being recorded on April 11th. Things change fast in college football. You you can rake me over the coals if you want, but the transfer portal isn't even open for the second round. So this is Alabama as we stand today, and we'll get through as much as we can. But first, let's give you an overview of what we saw from Alabama last year and recently. This team, I'll bring myself off the screen. That way you can see all of last year's stats. And of course, this was a pretty good team. They were on the cusp of making the college football playoff. This team was a top 25 offense, a top 10 defense. The weakest links for this team, honestly, were their offensive line, where they finished 68th in pass blocking, 78th in run blocking, and then their pass rush trailed a little bit behind at 45th overall. But this was the first year of Kalen DeBoer. Now we move into our second season. And, I mean, things are just going to be a lot more smooth, it seems like, on paper. He brings back his offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. These two were together when they brought Washington to the national championship. And then DeBoer had to hire a new OC last year. Grubb tried to go up to the NFL. It was a failed stint with the Seattle Seahawks. Now he's back down, and this has been an offense that's morphed a lot. Last time we saw Grubb in college, Washington was 86th in pace and 6th in pass rate, a very pass-heavy team. Obviously, with DeBoer and last year's staff, they were never going to be that high with Jalen Milroe at QB. They were 69th in pace and with a 43.5% pass rate. So expecting some changes with Grubb back in the fold. Defense returns Kane Womack as DC, previously the head coach of South Alabama for the 3 years prior to him taking the Alabama job. So we should see him. But I mean, this is Alabama. There's really nothing to be said. This is an awesome team. And honestly, this starts with all the way back in recruiting. And honestly, this has not fallen off since DeBoer has taken over. Here are the last three classes we've seen from Alabama. This team was first in 2023. They were second in 2024. And they just brought in the third recruiting class overall in the nation this year. What might surprise you is the retention for this team. Obviously 100% this year, but these are Saban recruiting classes from 24 and 23. They've retained 71 and 62% of these players, and we're talking top 3 recruiting classes across the board. This is an absolute elite body of work for Kalen DeBoer, being able to retain these players. Last year's roster was very young, so this year we turn to what should be at least a little more of a veteran roster. But now we go to the real heart of the analysis. This is a tool that I've been using. It's just in a Google Sheet right now. We'll play around with the best way to distribute this to you guys, but it'll be available in some sort of draft format, draft preview. Basically what it is a 2-deep depth chart. On the left, you have the offense. Slightly to the right, you have the defense. It has all of the players. The guys in yellow are transfers coming in. The guys with the pinkish red are injured right now. It's spring ball. They're going to hold guys out for cautionary. You have the snaps played over the last 2 years, the recruiting ranking in terms of stars for the players, and then we have an overall score on a percentile for these players. And what this formula is, it's basically a sliding scale. It starts with your recruiting ranking, and then the more you play, the less your recruiting ranking is taken into consideration, and the more your overall play on the field is weighted. This is a metric weighted for all the major statistical categories for each of the positions, and then normalized so you can kind of get, like a Madden rating of how these players actually perform on the field. The potential holes in this formula are, one, level of competition. When you have transfers coming up, it's very different to just evaluate these players. The competition is different. Even if you were to just blanket G5 up to P5, Like playing at Tulane is different than playing at Miami, Ohio, which is different than playing at UTEP, which is also different than going up to TCU versus going up to Alabama. And the other point is injuries. You don't always know who is playing injured or whatnot. But let me bring this to a bigger screen so you can see it. We're going to start with the offense, and Alabama reaches a pivot point right away in their season because they move on from Jalen Milroe. He's going to the NFL, and they now have to replace the quarterback position. There are other potential holes, I guess you could call them. They lost 2 offensive linemen, Tyler Booker and Elijah Pritchett. Booker is going to be potentially a first-round draft pick. Pritchett was by far the weakest link on this team. But still, Milroe is the biggest departure in offense. He was the 12th most efficient QB on 300 dropbacks, or those with at least 300 dropbacks last year. Defense was very young. The main departures are Jihad Campbell, who's going to be a high draft pick, and Malachi Moore in the secondary. They also lost Tim Smith and Devontae Smith, who went to Notre Dame. So let's dive into the offensive roster first and foremost. They're going to be going to a 5-star QB, more than likely. I don't think Austin Mack is going to be a big factor in this QB battle. He's the former 4-star that DeBoer recruited over with Washington. Credit to him. He's followed DeBoer everywhere he's went, but it's probably time for Mack to hit the portal unless, I don't know, his NIL package is real nice to be a third stringer. Because all reports indicate this is going to be former 5-star Ty Simpson battling current incoming 5-star Keelan Russell in this QB battle. Simpson has a pretty high grade on this system just because he's actually played a little bit. 58% completion, 7.6 yards per attempt. That's on 50 career passes. I will say most of that is against backups, unlike a QB who's going to potentially be taking over as a starter like Gunnar Stockton, who saw real game action when Beck got hurt. Most of what we've seen from Simpson has been against FCS, horrible teams during blowouts. So it's not really the best glimpse of him, but he is a former 5-star, and he does have some mobility. He's currently averaging 5.9 yards per carry. It is on 22 attempts. He's just not a complete statue is the point. Keelan Russell comes in. He's the 2nd overall QB in this incoming class, the 2025 class. He is a passer first, but he does have some dual threat ability as well. It's a young position, but it is one that is set up for some success just because these are elite players. These are the best players in the country you'd like to be turning over your quarterback room to. It's going to come with some uncertainty. Young QBs often take their lumps. See Cade Klubnik, Nico Iamaleava, a lot of the 5-stars that play initially. It doesn't always go swimmingly at first, but there's no one you'd rather turn it over to, at least among new incoming starters. Running back, this team actually had a surprisingly efficient run game. We saw it at the beginning in the slides. A lot of that was Milroe. The actual running back position left a lot to be desired for Alabama. They lose Justice Haynes to Michigan. They still have former 4-star Jam Miller, who was semi-efficient. I still think left a lot to be desired. He's a smaller back at 5'10", 200 pounds, did catch 16 passes, but only averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Only went over 100 yards against USF, but he still also only handled more than 15 carries once. Without him, you're going to see some younger players get potential for, bigger workloads. Richard Young, he's a 5'11", 210-pound back. Daniel Hill is 6'1", 242, definitely profiles as more of a goal line back. Young is much different than Hill. Young is a former track star, while Hill is that big pounding short yardage guy. They also have Kevin Riley on the roster. He's a smaller back, 190 pounds. He's from the 2024 class. They also bring in A.K. Deere, a 4-star in this incoming class. To bolster depth, they brought in Draylen Washington from Louisiana. Just a quick note on that. Washington is 5'9", 218 pounds. Averaged over 5.5 yards per carry in 3 straight seasons at Louisiana. And a lot of people want to anoint these lower-level transfers coming up as the chosen one. And sometimes it works. Sometimes you get Cam Ward. But most of the time, you're getting Gage Larvaday. Most of the time, you're getting these players that aren't actually built for a higher level of competition. And Draylen Washington, he never handled more than 92 carries in a year. I would be surprised if he can beat out these actual elite recruits. But what this means is this position has good depth. Then we turn to wide receiver, which I think is probably the strength of their offense. It's either this or the offensive line. And it starts with Ryan Williams, the 2025 5-star. Just what an elite season he had as a freshman. 48 catches, 865 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6 feet, 175. But he was playing at such a young age. He is a downfield target. Average depth of target at 14.3. I guess if you're poking holes, the only concern I can really see with him, 7 drops. That was nearly 13% of his targets. But generally speaking, drops are a fairly correctable part of someone's game. So I'm not super worried about Ryan Williams. But he did lack 100-yard games. That's not something he got too much. I think that's more of a function of the offense, having a 43.5% pass rate, having Milroe under center, who, he doesn't finish as the 12th most efficient QB without being a productive player. And a lot of that came in the run game. He was streaky as a passer, but there were still highs. Anyway, on top of Ryan Williams, they have former five-star Jeremy Bernard now at his third stop after starting with Michigan State, moving to Washington. Much different player. He's their slot receiver, mainly 6'1", 202 pounds. Caught more balls than Ryan Williams, but 794 yards, did not have quite as much yardage. He did operate outside the slot a little bit too. Only 51% of his routes came from that alignment, but he played more of an underneath role for Alabama. That's not an area where Milroe succeeded, so I'm not surprised to see his numbers come in a little bit behind Williams. But anyway, having these two proven commodities at wide receiver is an awesome place to start. And from there, they went out and added Isaiah Horton from Miami, who's just a much different looking receiver than these two. He's 6'4", 209 pounds, caught 56 balls for 616 yards, pure perimeter receiver. But now you have a complete blend of players at this wide receiver room. You have Bernard in the slot, a potential X receiver, big bodied Isaiah Horton, and then you have more of your burner Z in Ryan Williams. They also have a lot of depth. Jalen Hale, he's still on this team, former five-star. Jalen Mbakwe, they moved him from defensive back over to receiver at the tail end of last year. He's been practicing as a wide receiver through the offseason. They have former four-stars Cole Adams, Rico Scott, Bubba Hampton, who is hurt right now. He's missing spring, but they're still on the roster. And then they brought in a pair of top 200 receivers in Derek Meadows and Latsier Brooks. Latsier Brooks is basically the talk of the town right now in the wide receiver room in Tuscaloosa. So I wouldn't be surprised to see any of these guys get on the field. The Cole Adams, Rico Scott, and Bubba Hampton are a little bit of a stretch for me, but you never know with these teams. They have a great foundation to start with, and if one of the young elite recruits can beat out a Horton or a Bernard or something like that, that means they're a stud. Tight end, they lost CJ Dippre. They've lost players from multiple recruiting cycles now. I guess losing Amari Niblack was probably a good thing for Alabama at this point after he couldn't get on the field with Texas, but this leaves kind of a void in the overall tight end room. Josh Cuevas is 6'3", 252. He's going to be your main tight end. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, he was okay. He finished fourth on the team in receiving last year, 256 yards and 16 catches. I think that's more of, like a bug in the system than Cuevas being an elite player. He's a former Cal Poly transfer up to Washington and then followed DeBoer over. You just he's undersized, or at least short, 6'3", 252. He's not a great blocker. He's average there. But who else are you going to throw on the field? They have Jay Lindsey and Danny Lewis. Right now, Danny Lewis isn't practicing, which isn't great because he kind of needs the work. Jay Lindsey's just young. Maybe he can develop into something else. But yeah, otherwise you're looking at freshmen. Caleb Edwards, Marshall Pritchett come in as 4-stars. They might need them. I highly doubt you see Peter Knudsen, who's a transfer from Weber State. He's just again, FCS transfers coming to the SEC, this is a recipe for disaster if these guys have to play. They're awesome for depth, but, you can go basically on one hand and name the tight ends from the FCS that have succeeded at a higher level of competition year one. The offensive line should be a strength. They lose Booker mainly is the biggest departure you're worried about, but they have 3 full-time starters back, 5 with significant experience, which makes them a little deeper. I think the biggest weakness for the offensive line is probably your depth at tackle, but you have some stalwarts at least to man the front line, starting with Caden Proctor, 3rd season straight as a starter. He did battle an injury last year, so he missed a couple games. Still only allowed 14 pressures, played 639 snaps. You know what you're getting with Proctor. The right tackle, this should be Wilkin Formby. He's going to be a new full-time starter, but he did play decent on 291 snaps last year. Other than that, I think the interior should be pretty solid. There is a battle at left guard right now. Cam Dewberry is a transfer from Texas A&M. He'll be facing off against an incumbent starter in Gino Vandemark. Dewberry, he does have 7 career starts, but he hit the bench last year. None of those starts came in 2024. He still has pretty good marks overall. This is a guy that just played a lot of snaps. Only 32 pressures allowed on 611 career pass blocking reps. It's solid. And Vandemark's played quite a bit since he came over from Michigan State, too. I think at the very worst, your left guard position is looking like an average starter, and the depth is solid. Center, this is just a lockdown position. Parker Brailsford, the former Washington transfer, over 775 snaps the last 2 years with elite marks. You know what you're getting at center. And then right guard, Jaden Roberts, he's played over 500 snaps 2 straight years, another player with elite marks. So I think at the very least, you know that Brailsford, Roberts, and Proctor are going to be strong starters for you. I think you're going to get a strong guard out of Cam Dewberry or Vandermark, and then having that sort of swing interior player is nice for you. It kind of, to me, comes down to what are you going to get at right tackle out of Formby, who's another elite recruit. And if it doesn't work, you do have some depth pieces. Allen In, former 4-star, Rock Montgomery, 4-star from 2023, Casey Poe and William Sanders from 2024. Then you have this incoming class. Michael Carroll's a 5-star, Jackson Lloyd's a 4-star, Micah DeBose's a 4-star, Mal Waldrop's a 4-star. It's tough to rely on young tackles, so I don't have any of them in the 2 deep. But this is a position that should be fairly strong if you could develop something. The backup right tackle on the 2 deep right now is a transfer from the Mac and Arca Anuguam, excuse me. He was not recruited to play football. He's a player that's new to the country relatively, comes with just an elite, monstrous frame, but he's definitely a project. He's played a little bit so far, but I mean, he was a guy they were really going to have to tailor. So, I mean, he has a 29.4 rating. That's largely because he was not recruited to play football, and he's a little ball of clay. But if he does actually end up being something with that frame, you could be looking at an awesome tackle prospect. And while we're at it, just down here, this is where you're going to see all the elite reserves. They're sorted right now by our player score, which, these are mostly freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores that haven't played much. That's why they're not in the 2 deep. So it's not sorted by recruiting ranking, but it is correlated heavily with that right now. So you see Michael Carroll, the stud freshman 5-star, he's the highest. Yanze Pierre, former 5-star edge, comes in second. But yeah, that's where we stand with the offense. That's a very good unit overall. And we'll get to how they rank in comparison to the other SEC, but it's very good. It's a veteran unit without many departures. You love what you see from this offense. On defense, I think you have a lot of good options as well. This edge group is absolutely loaded, even though they lost Tim Smith. You look at the top, you have 503 snaps back from LT Overton. You have 403 back from Quay Rusaw. These players are both former 5-stars. And there's versatility here. There's just so much you could potentially get out of this unit because you, like in the depth, you have Yanze Pierre, Jordan Renaud. That doesn't even include some of the incoming guys. Like Justin Hill's an incoming 4-star freshman. Noah Carter, redshirt freshman, hasn't seen a lot of work. And you do have some versatility here as well because some of these players, like Kelby Collins, who comes in from Florida, he's somebody that can play edge or defensive tackle for this team because of his size. Like he's probably more of a 5 technique, but in a pinch, if you need him to play outside or something like that, there's just so much you can do with this. We didn't even talk about Jamarian Lathan, who played 441 snaps as well. This edge group has so much experience and high-end talent. It's hard not to rank them among the premier edge rushing group in the SEC. And when you look at the defensive tackle unit, it's not far behind. You return 446 snaps from Tim Keenan, the third. You return another 310 from James Smith. Keenan, he's a low-level recruit, but as you can see, he's played a lot of football, and he's played extremely well on that football, which boosts his ranking up quite a bit here. He was just the premier run stuffer for this team as well. He's a player that just absolutely clogged the middle and had some elite run defense metrics. James Smith, elite as well. We have Kelby Collins listed as defensive tackle, mentioned some of his versatility. He could absolutely play the edge. He's a player that had 274 snaps for Florida 2 years ago and then saw his role diminish last year. The final player in the 2 deep at defensive tackle, Jeremiah Beeman. I wouldn't be surprised to see someone else take this just because they have elite players across the board for this team. You still have Eldrick Hill, who played 58 snaps last year, former 4-star, redshirt sophomore now. And you can go down the board for even some younger players. Steve Bolo Mumbua, sophomore, former 4-star as well. Just absolutely loaded. And at linebacker, I mean, you do have to replace Jahad Campbell, which isn't easy. But you look at Deontay Lawson, he only trailed slightly in terms of efficiency metrics. And Jahad Campbell's a first-round pick by a lot of mock drafts. Lawson's a multi-year starter. He has over 600 snaps each of the last 2 years. The biggest concern with him, I think, is he's coming off a severe injury. So is he back? I think he will be. I believe it was an ACL that was kind of mid-season. And he did an interview where he was mentioning wanted to go to the draft, or at least had thought about it. And that ACL tear, I believe it was against Oklahoma. He ends up wanting to come back and play another season because he mentioned not winning a national championship. So if he's full go, I mean, he's an elite player to bring back. Justin Jefferson, 442 snaps last year. He was solid, projected to start alongside Deontay Lawson. And from there, you bring in a transfer from Colorado in Nikai Hill-Green. This guy's been all over the place. I mean, he started his career with Michigan. He transferred down to Charlotte, which is where he really realized success. Then he went back up to Colorado, and he basically was right on average for what you expect for a linebacker. So, I mean, now he transfers over to the SEC. I think he's going to be a depth linebacker, a third linebacker, but it's good to have somebody with so much experience at this point. He is a former four-star, so maybe it's still in there. A lot of high recruits for this team as well. We have Caden Jones, the 2024 four-star on the 2 deep, but you bring in, I mean, this 2025 class. Duke Johnson, 4-star. Luke Metz, 4-star. Abdul Sanders Jr., 4-star. And you can see that down here. There's elite linebackers across the board for this team. As long as we get Deontay Lawson, full, clean bill of health, this should be a great unit. And then we go to corner. This was the biggest concern from them heading into the year. If you remember, they lost a ton of guys in last year's draft, the 2024 draft, and the only guy they returned was Malachi Moore. But just 5 stars loaded across the board. And now a lot of those players have experience. They did add some transfers as well where it made sense. And now you have a very deep unit that really just loses Malachi Moore because Devontae Smith going to Notre Dame, he was a rotational DB. So it starts with corner. First up, we have Damani Jackson returning after he played 717 snaps last year. He's not practicing right now, out for the spring, but awesome player, former 5-star, played with USC. I have no real questions with him other than the health. I think he should be fine. And then I think you see Zabian Brown opposite him on the perimeter. This is a former 5-star. He's now a sophomore. This is one of those players that was forced into action last year. Both of them were strong in coverage. They had at least 6 pass breakups, 5 interceptions combined. I mean, this is a great unit overall. I think you really like where it's at heading into year 2. Both of these guys, first-year starters with Bama last year. Damani previously started with USC. And then at nickel, I think you're going to see former Wake Forest transfer Deshaun Jones start. He played 295 above-average snaps last year. He was the starter in the bowl game, and he has a full year of starting experience previously at Wake Forest. I think he's solid. And then if he doesn't work out or one of these guys doesn't work out, you have so much depth. They bring in Cam Calhoun. He was originally with Michigan in 2023, but transfers over to Utah where he played nearly 400 snaps, had to start some games, had really strong production when he was on the field too. And if that doesn't work, 2024 4-star Red Morgan, Dejon Lee, who's a 5-star, Chuck McDonald, you have a lot of potential options here at corner just among your youth. Safety should be a position of strength as well. They're returning 2 starters. You bring in Bray Hubbard, who comes back after he played 429 snaps with very strong metrics across the board. You could argue this was their best overall defensive back last year, and I think that makes a lot of sense. You look at just what he allowed on passes in his direction. He allowed to catch every 20, or he was only targeted every 20 snaps. That trailed only Malachi Moore. And then I'm not sure about Sab. He's probably the bigger question among the two. Not probably, almost certainly is. The Michigan transfer, he was their worst player in coverage last year, and he's currently not practicing. So I'm wondering how healthy he was down the stretch. But it's not like there aren't potential replacements if Sab can't come out and have a better season. You have former 5-star Xavier Mincy still in there. He should get a look. He started the bowl game for this team. Somehow Dre Kirkpatrick, a former 3-star, and man, showing my age with Dre Kirkpatrick Jr., he's a name that keeps popping up even though he wasn't highly recruited. I believe this is probably, like a legacy recruitment for him, but he actually ends up being awesome for this team, at least according to early reports. So that's also worth mentioning. But I mean, still 4 stars in the depth class. Ivan Taylor. You can always scroll down here and just see these players. There's a fair amount of DBs on this list. And I mean, a lot of them are in the 2 deep already, but just a fantastic unit overall. As far as special teams go, you bring back Connor Talty. Didn't play a lot last year. I mean, they brought in Graham Nicholson, which has me at least a little bit concerned because Talty was actually recruited as a kicker, which a lot of kickers aren't recruited. So I mean, even the fact that he has a recruiting ranking is a feather in his cap. But we just haven't seen a lot of him. So I mean, it's a little concerning that they brought in a transfer over him, but who knows? Nicholson was previously the MAC Kicker of the Year, whatever that award is. So that's at least worth mentioning. But this is the roster for this team. A couple other notes for those of you that will hopefully eventually be looking at this. On the far right, we have departures, just so it's easy to see, like on defense, the main snap losses. Sorry, Damani Jackson should not be in here. This will need to be cleaned up a little bit, I'm noticing right now. Again, we're kind of doing this on the fly, so I'll come in and correct the departures. It also says offensive should be defensive. Anyway, I know for a fact that the offensive departures are correct, so we'll just erase this now and I'll fix it after the show. But it'll be updated if you ever have interest in looking at it. Departing transfers, you can see there's a lot of them, mostly players of depth for this team. And then incoming transfers, we mentioned most of them, I think every one of them, but that's where you get with this team. And overall, I'm not sure about the total scale. I might adjust this a little bit because I'm thinking your best teams in the country are going to come in around 65, 70, where Alabama is right now. And then you can see where it's mostly landing. The offense is better, the defense is better than the offense. I think that's just a product of having some absolute studs back and more experience. Not to mention QB still a question for this team. And then if you want to just look at the starters, this is where they grade out there. On a separate tab, I have overall rankings for these teams. We're fully finished with the top 5 and then quick early depth chart projections for the rest of the conference, the other 11 teams, but this will all be fully fleshed out soon. Right now, we have Alabama as the top team in the conference, ahead of Texas A&M, Texas, Georgia slightly. And a lot of it is just the returning production combined with the 5 stars everywhere. If you're interested in the other tabs, we'll have a little injury suites. As you can see, these are the teams we're already working through, hoping to fully get through every team and keep this updated. The portal, I think a better view is just on the team by team and then coaches overall. Hoping to release this to the public through maybe the end of the week as we get all of the teams finished and then continue to record these videos. But if you have any feedback, please let me know. The work in progress, clearly. Would love to hear anything you guys think would be a good way to display information, ideas for what you'd want to hear about these teams and whatnot. Realizing I didn't go into schedule with Alabama. I guess last thing to briefly talk about, it's a relatively weak schedule for the SEC. Obviously, in non-con, playing Florida State and Wisconsin is not going to be easy, but Wisconsin, by all accounts, is down a little bit. Florida State should be up from where they were. You can't possibly be any more down. Then you've got Eastern Illinois and UL Monroe in non-con. So I think you're probably 4-0 there, but this is at least a little tougher than a lot of teams. What you're looking at in conference is where this gets a little bit easier. It is not the toughest SEC path, which is why I think this is a favorable schedule for them. They do not play Texas. They do not play Texas A&M. They do not play Florida. Right now, according to our power rankings, those are 3 of the top 5 teams. You do play Georgia on the road, which is tough. But, I mean, we're talking about a lot of middling to bottom feeder teams in this conference. Auburn's a decent team. Oklahoma's a decent team. LSU's a decent team. You have to go to South Carolina. That's never easy. But you still do have Vanderbilt and Missouri, which do not project to be good teams. And shockingly, we have Tennessee as one of our worst teams in this conference. That's not including Imaliava maybe being gone. I'll show you again. This is with Imaliava supposed to be on the roster. We currently have Tennessee as our 3rd worst team in the conference. We'll explain that later, and perhaps this will change by the time you view it. The portal's about to open. But that'll do it for us. It went a little longer than I like, so hopefully we can trim this down. But thank you for watching. We'll be back again soon with more breakdowns. Let me know who you want to hear about next. Good luck.